Hello everyone, peace be with you. I hope you're doing well. It's me, Samuel, again. I'm back with a continuation to our series. First and foremost, I would like to wish all those who celebrate Eid al-Adha, Eid Mubarak, a happy Eid. Ruhus Ba'al Adha, because Eid and Eid means Ba'al in Tigrinya, so Eid just means festival. So, and the Eid of sacrifice is the sacrifice which it's based on the sacrifice. If you guys study the Quran and the Bible, it's the sacrifice that, so that if you remember Abraham, he was given a command in his dream where he sacrifices his son. Now, according to the Christians, it's Isaac. According to the Muslims, many say Ishmael, but there are reports that say it was Isaac. Both views are there. Because Abraham, as well as his children, were very faithful to God and loyal to God and God alone, Abraham told his son that he was commanded to slaughter him. So his son said, if that's what God commanded you, then I'm at God's service, basically. So Abraham wanted to slaughter his son. If I'm not mistaken, an angel came, replaced his son with a ram. Abraham slaughtered the lamb. So this was a test of faith. And so Abraham passed the test. And he passed every test. So, yes. So Abraham, by the way, in Arabic, he's known as Ibrahim. That's the Arabized version of Abraham. But there's at least one recitation of the Quran, as there are different recitations, where his name is Ibrahim. So, in any case, we spoke last time about the second flight of refugees, the second rural exodus, and it became quite extreme due to, in my understanding, due to the increasing hostilities between the Ethiopian government of Haile Selassie and the resistance. So Haile Selassie, may God curse him, came with a second scorched earth policy. He wanted, so he just went on this, killing rampage. We went over the number of refugees, which just skyrocketed as time passed. There were times where it was either stagnant or it decreased, but generally speaking, it would just increase exponentially. So we mentioned also that there was a mention that the years of refugee exodus from 1967 in 1967 and 1970 to 71. So 67 and 70 to 71, there were also years of internal crises for the ELF. During the first period, a few fighters, Kabesans by origin, mainly Christians in my understanding, they left the front partly because of a generalized tension and ethno-religious distrust caused by the zonal commanders of the army. So that's something important to keep in mind, and it is something that will be discussed, God willing. So that's where we pretty much, that's what we were talking about, that many people left the country. We will continue on and begin chapter 6, Armed Struggle and Refugees, phase 2. So 1971 to 1991. Without further ado, we shall begin. I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I praise and I glorify him as he ought to be praised and glorified. Let us begin. Chapter 6, Armed Struggle and Refugees, Phase 2, 1975 to 1991. In a passionate yet penetrating editorial on the root causes of refugeeism, the World Refugee Survey of 1989 summarized the interplay of the issues and actors in these words. So these are the following words, and I quote: refugees are the flotsam of power struggles, world, regional, and local. The powerful who have created the misery of the weak have little regard for the tolls they have exacted and even less incentive for rectifying the losses incurred because of their actions. Therefore, the refugees are left to wait, and if they retain the energy, to hope. So this is written by Roger P. Winter, 1989 in review, World Refugee Survey, U.S. Committee for Refugees, Washington, 1989, page 2. So as you can see, rulers don't care. Okay, they don't care about the situation of refugees. They don't care about the issues they cause for them. Leaders do not care about these things. So-called leaders who get involved in power struggles, they don't care. So this is these are the words of the found in the World Refugee Survey, and they're true, without a doubt. And you can see it today happening in the world: Sudan, Ethiopia, Palestine, other places as well. So in any case, we continue. Those political refugees who left Eritrea to stay in Nasser's Egypt. So those political refugees who left Eritrea to stay in Nasser's Egypt. Jamal Abdel Nasser. The man was not the servant of the Nasser. The Nasser, I believe, means God, the one who, a name of God, the one who aids, the one who gives help. But Abdel Nasser had nothing to do with God. It doesn't matter if he prayed or went to pilgrimage. It doesn't make a difference. This man had nothing to do with God. So when it comes to them, the political refugees who left Eritrea to stay in Nasser's Egypt and the newly independent Sudan in the 1950s, spent their lifetimes there. They spent their lifetimes in Egypt. The tens of thousands who in 1967 and 1970 crossed the Eritrean border thought they were only in need of a temporary shelter in the sweltering refugee camps of eastern Sudan. In the past quarter of a century, the situation had worsened, with the number of Eritrean refugees and internally displaced persons growing to astronomical figures between 1975 and 1991. But all these waves of refugees had never totally given up the idea of returning home one day. So my understanding is the past quarter of a century relative to the last century, which was the 20th century. And as you can see, the internally displaced persons grew to astronomical figures. And but those waves of refugees had never totally given up the idea of returning home one day. Change of regime or political order in Ethiopia was long overdue. Many forces inside and outside the country had eagerly waited for the downfall or the death of the emperor to improve their political positions, similar to what many of us Eritreans are doing, waiting for Isaias Afwerki to drop dead. God willing, very soon. God willing, now. To improve their political positions in the transitional period. So many forces inside and outside the country had eagerly waited for the downfall or the death of the emperor to improve their political positions in the transitional period. Everyone rightly calculated that the multi-ethnic empire state, so-called Ethiopia, which Menelik II in the 19th century expanded from small Abyssinia into the big modern state of Ethiopia, would suffer instability and possible disintegration. Again, everyone rightly calculated that the multi-ethnic empire state, which Menelik II in the 19th century expanded from small Abyssinia into the big modern state of Ethiopia, would suffer instability and possible disintegration. This is a question people ask now. Will Ethiopia be the next Yugoslavia? Like all empires old and new, after Haile Selassie I. So they would they calculated that this empire state of Ethiopia would suffer instability and possible disintegration, like all empires, old and new, after Haile Selassie. Eritreans were among those eager expectants who, by their relentless action, greatly contributed to the demise of the ancient regime. The Eritrean contribution was not limited to Ethiopia's battlefield losses and huge financial expenditures. Ethiopia spent money on that war. Wars cost money, they're not cheap. And if you're a country that already may not have money, then you're in trouble. So their role in accelerating political consciousness among urban Ethiopians was very significant. So the Eritreans inspired urban Ethiopians, which is a good thing. Emperor Haile Selassie's regime started to crumble down in early 1974. And it took the Ethiopian army 18 months to come over its old loyalties to the absolutist king of kings and to announce a takeover in September. Dramatic developments were simultaneously taking place in Eritrea as well as in the hearts and minds of Eritreans wherever they were. To adequately assess and interpret the process of nationalist transformation in Eritrea during this critical period in the recent history of the struggle, it is important to examine the social and political development of the liberation struggle and Ethiopia's additional contributions in the flight of many Eritrean, it says Eritrean, but I believe it's supposed to be Eritreans, of many Eritreans from their homes. So it is important to examine the social and political development of the liberation struggle, the resistance, the revolution, and Ethiopia's additional contributions in the flight of many Eritreans from their homes. The subsequent 2 chapters will show how Eritrean fronts exacerbated refugeeism, how they made it worse, how the Eritrean fronts, the Eritrean revolutionary fronts made it worse, exacerbated refugeeism, and how international action and the influence of Eritrean communities abroad also became pull factors in the uprooting of many Eritreans. So you see, it wasn't just Ethiopia, as we mentioned before, that was responsible for this. It was also Eritreans themselves. And this is an honest truth. You know, a person, a hardcore nationalist who doesn't know what the heck he's talking about might say, this is an anti-Eritrea paper. This is against Eritrea. This is against the the sovereignty of Eritrea. This is against Eritrea. Whoever wrote this must be a Tigrayan or something like that. You know, this is how many people think these days. But the truth is, this was written by a pragmatic, if that's the right word, a well-rounded man. So it's Eritrea, Root Causes of War and Refugees by Mr. Walde Jesus Ammar. So we have here the next section. Eritrean nationalism gathers momentum. No one can tell with figures what percentage of the Eritrean people supported the nationalist struggle at any given time in the past 30 years. Past 30 years relative to 1992. Similarly, no exact figures are available, or not 1992, perhaps maybe when he was writing it. I don't know if, I don't know what month it came out in 1992. So we'll just say 1992 or somewhat earlier than that. Relative to that time, that's what he means when he says the past 30 years. So no one can tell with figures what percentage of the Eritrean people supported the nationalist struggle at any given time in the past 30 years. Similarly, no exact figures are available on the number of liberation fighters at any given time in the past. Yet, learned guesses can be made in measuring the momentum of the struggle during the various phases. Both popular support to the struggle and expectations of victory were definitely low in the 1960s. So the popular support of the struggle and the expectations of victory were low in the 1960s. These had to be built through years of bitter struggle. But by 1974 to 1975, one can reasonably argue, as John Markakis states, that an Eritrean national consciousness forged in the struggle had emerged. So an Eritrean national consciousness forged in the struggle had emerged. John Markakis, The Nationalist Revolution in Eritrea, Journal of Modern African Studies, volume 26, 1 in parentheses, volume 26, March 1988, page 62, forgive me, page 62. This nascent nationalism, this new nationalism, newborn nationalism, found fertile ground in the repeated failures of the new military regime in Ethiopia. Fertile ground in the repeated failures of the new military regime in Ethiopia, the Derg, Mengistu's regime. May God curse him. In Ethiopia, which opted to continue searching a solution to what it called the Eritrean problem created by feudal Haile Selassie through the barrel of the gun. This is how they believed the matter can be solved. They wanted to solve the problem. Their solution was to be done through the barrel of the gun. The most astonishing thing was that Ethiopians never learned from the emperor's failure to win the war in Eritrea militarily. The first Ethiopian head of state named by the Derg, or the new military junta, after the fall of the emperor was the Eritrean Aman Andom. He was killed in 1974. So the first leader, the first head of state, who was named by the Derg regime, socialist regime, he was an Eritrean named Aman Andom. I hope I'm saying that right, because it's not written in Ge'ez, it's written in English. Aman Andom, he was killed in 1974 when he suggested a peaceful compromise solution to the conflict. He suggested a peaceful compromise, he was killed. Aman Andom, an Eritrean by origin, was educated in the Sudan. He won fame of having commanded the Ethiopian army which defeated Somalia in 1964. Success of his peace plan for Eritrea would have altered recent history in the region. So his plan would have altered the history, but he was killed. So, and I would think that nobody took his place. Nobody raised his standard. When the standard falls, when the flag falls, someone's got to pick it up. But apparently nobody did, or nobody had the power to do so. It was true that the majority of the Christian Kabesans became resentful of the union with Ethiopia, in which they were treated as second-class citizens with very little access to state power and privilege. Again, it was true that the majority of Christian Kabesans from the highlands became resentful. The majority of them became resentful of the union with Ethiopia, in which they were treated as second-class citizens with very little access to state power and privilege. Nor was Ethiopia a promised land of milk and honey, as the unionist propaganda had lied way back in the 40s, when the unionist propaganda was around. As shown in Table 2 on page 77, Eritreans discovered that Ethiopia was lagging behind all countries. We will see it soon in the upcoming video. As shown in Table 2 on page 77, Eritreans discovered that Ethiopia was lagging behind all countries practically in everything. Lagging practically in everything, almost like now. Sounds like now. In 1960, for instance, 62% of primary school-aged children in Kenya went to school, while the corresponding figure for Ethiopia was a mere 7%. 7% compared to Kenya. We think of Ethiopia, many people think of Ethiopia as this super empire, this superpower. That defended against the Italians, this and that, and Ethiopia is the only power not to have been colonized and blah, blah, blah. Ethiopia was a failure of a nation. Yes, it defeated the Italians. It also sold out Eritrea. And yes, the land which was north of the Merab River. And yes, Ethiopia became an empire, through theft, through land grabbing. But Ethiopia was not stable. And it never was truly stable. It did do better during, in my understanding, during Meles Zenawi's time, but it wasn't enough. it wasn't enough. So the first so nor was Ethiopia a promised land of milk and honey. They found out that 1960, 62% of primary school age children in Kenya went to school, while the corresponding figure for Ethiopia was a mere 7%. 7% of this whole empire went to school. The source is Zollberg, Escape from Violence, page 108. Zollberg, E-T-A-L, et al., Escape from Violence, op.cit, opposite, page 108. I believe these are Latin terms used to, I always forget to look, I haven't looked them up. I didn't think to look them, well, I did think to look them up, but it must have been a shallow, it wasn't a priority. Here, I'll write it here to look them up because it's something important. Okay, so Arnold Toynbee's blatant observation that Ethiopia was the best justification that could be found for the partitioning of the rest of Africa among European powers did not look far-fetched to many people. Again, Arnold Toynbee, he was one of those people that were involved in figuring out what would happen with Eritrea, if you remember from the beginning of our program here. Arnold Toynbee's blatant observation that Ethiopia was the best justification that could be found for the partitioning of the rest of Africa among European powers did not look far-fetched to many people. Didn't look far-fetched. Yet the Ethiopian regimes were bent at suppressing Eritrean discontent at any cost. They were bent at suppressing Eritrean discontent at any cost. You know, those people are screaming and they're, telling them to keep quiet. We're almost done here. Worse was to come to Ethiopia when the suppression became more and more indiscriminate. It was already known that undue Ethiopian interference in Eritrean affairs might also provoke a dangerous, if not immediate, reaction on the part of the Eritrean Abyssinians, Kabessans, the Eritrean Habasha, who are the Kabessans. It should not be supposed that the Unionists, in this case Kabessans, it should not be supposed that the Unionists of yesterday will dance as happily to Ethiopian tunes tomorrow. Again, so this is Travaskis. Travaskis said this. He says, and the source for Travaskis is found in the beginning. I will mention at the very end of these series all of the sources. The book is Eritrea, Root Causes of War and Refugees by Walde Jesus Ammar. You can find the PDF online. Eritrea, Root Causes of War and Refugees. Make sure you type it right. So again, Travaskis says that undue Ethiopian interference in Eritrean affairs might also provoke a dangerous, if not immediate, reaction on the part of the Eritrean Abyssinians. In brackets, it says read Kabessans or read Kabessans, meaning the Kabessans. It should not be supposed that the Unionists of yesterday, who are made up, I believe, mainly of Christians, will dance as happily to Ethiopian tunes tomorrow. They will not be as supportive of Ethiopia as they were yesterday. They will not be as happy as they were yesterday tomorrow. So, a quick, we mentioned what Toynbee said. Toynbee, Arnold J. Toynbee, that quote by him, the best justification that could be found for the partitioning of the rest of Africa among European powers, meaning his justification for that. Ethiopia was the best justification for that. That's from Arnold. That's A Study of History, abridgment of volumes 1 through 6 by D.C. Somerville, Oxford, UP, 1946, page 162. So that's Arnold J. Toynbee, A Study of History, abridgment of volumes 1 through 6 by D.C. Somerville, Oxford, UP, 1946, page 162. So we'll leave off there, but we will continue next time, and we will discuss the money situation of Ethiopia, something completely humiliating and terrible. In any case, we will continue with the angry reaction of Kabessans to Ethiopia, and why it was delayed. We're going to talk about that. We're going to get into the economy, and we will continue our journey, God willing, next time. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back, God willing, soon. This is Samuel. I'll see you guys next time. Always take good care of yourselves. Peace be with you.